If you've ever had a reaction that felt way bigger than what actually happened in your communication with the other person, let's say they didn't text back for a long time and you got really worked up and started to get frustrated or angry, or the way that they communicated to you, the specific tone made you feel upset or fearful or sad, and part of you is thinking, I shouldn't be reacting this way. This is disproportionate to what I'm experiencing. This episode is for you. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode. It's been a bit of a minute. I have been in the offline realms, completely consumed with personal life stuff. I have a new niece, I have a new nephew, had some personal stuff happen with my family, and I got married. So it has been full on lifing in all of its forms, beautiful and sad, and I've just been really having a big human experience in the last month, but I've missed being here and really wanted to get an episode out. So I decided to make something based on a conversation that comes up with my clients, or when women join Becoming Her and I have a welcome call with them. This almost always comes up, and it's this experience of feeling like we are too much, or we're crazy, or we shouldn't be reacting the way that we are. And so on a logical mental level, your beautiful adult self can see, hey, this intensity that I feel, or the spiral that I get taken down on, isn't really equal to what I'm experiencing, but my body feels so anxious or so stressed, and I don't know what to do about it. And so because you are a self-aware woman who has been listening to this podcast or reading books and learning about this stuff, there's probably part of you that is aware I shouldn't be feeling this way. And so because that is the story, we make the first mistake. And so I want to ask you right now to just reflect for a moment on how it feels for you to be slow. How does it feel for you to be gentle with yourself? How does it feel for you to be graceful with yourself? And are you those things? Would you consider yourself someone who is gentle on herself? And maybe you're learning that more and more, because if you're on this journey, then you're probably also on a journey of rediscovering your boundaries and needs and self-care and tending to your nervous system. But what I find in a lot of the women I work with is that we don't have a lot of willingness to go really slow and be really soft. And sometimes it's easier to apply that to other people. And if you have a friend that's having a hard time, you might be able to comfort her and sit with her and validate her. But we just don't turn that same level of care and softness, I'm going to use that word again, onto ourselves. So to bring it back to the topic, when we have one of these reactions, what usually follows is, I shouldn't be feeling this way, I shouldn't be thinking this way, a lot of shoulds, right? And that can also bring up some shame of, this is embarrassing, this is too much of a reaction, this is dramatic. And I want to just give you some context about what's going on so that you can understand why this probably will not work, and how when we do that, when we kind of catch ourselves in those sort of big, let's call them dramatic reactions or triggers, we can say, I shouldn't feel this way because my partner actually does love me, or they actually are so sweet. And that might work for a few minutes. And then if you haven't got what you wanted, whether it was a text back or an apology or a communication, like a conversation, then you're probably going to find yourself back in that mental spiral again, or still feeling really anxious. So when we have a reaction like this, let's say we're really sensitive to people's tone, the tone of their voice. So if someone responds to you in a bit of a harsh or brash or impatient way, you might have a reaction in your body. And if you also feel confident that this person is healthy and loving and they're a good person, then chances are that that reaction is probably from something very old. It's something your body is remembering, potentially from childhood, or someone else that you had a close relationship with, like a caregiver, a parent, a teacher, a coach, a best friend, a sibling that had that, but then probably took it too far. So they actually were withholding love, or they actually were going to stonewall you, or they actually did gaslight you. And so this similar tone feeling is basically alerting something in your body that, oh, there could be danger here. But again, if you can trust and know that the person you're relating to isn't malicious and they do care for you, then it helps us to not take it quite so personally. But going a level deeper is that that trigger reaction, whether it's defensiveness or stress or panic, is something from your childhood, aka it's a part of your psyche that has the understanding, intelligence, awareness of a small child. So now I want you to think, when you have this experience, that you are reckoning in your own psyche with a child, not with the adult that knows better, not with the part of you that sees what's happening and sees that it's a little bit imbalanced or disproportionate. You are reckoning with a child. So what does that mean? If your natural response to this is this, I shouldn't, this is bad, this is too much, oh my God, I'm crazy, I'm bad, I'm dramatic, what would a child do if you said that to her? She would probably get more upset. She wouldn't feel seen, or she would shut down. She would self-isolate in her room. She would not feel safe to share her emotions with you anymore. And so that is the type of basically inner dialogue I want you to have, as if you are talking to a child, because to that child, you would probably validate them and be really gentle and really soft. And you might say to yourself, hey, sweetie, I understand you're feeling scared right now. Let's take a breath together. Let's remember that so-and-so, this person we're dating, is really sweet, that they really have our best interest in mind, and that he or she is just stressed out with work right now. Do you see that? And you might notice a part of you actually relax into that and remember, oh, yeah, this isn't about me. Or you might notice that that part of you gets fired up and has all these crazy thoughts that you've been having of, what if he leaves? What if this happens? What if they hate me? What if his family hates me? What if this? What if that? What if, something terrible? This is something terrible about being alone and alone forever. That's usually what is at the root of these fears, whether they are rooted in reality or not. And that's when you get to soothe her and say, okay, but no matter what happens, I've got me. No matter what happens, we know that we can lean on this other person, or whatever this part of you needs to hear. I don't know what it needs to hear. It's going to be different for every single person watching this video, what the part of you that needs soothing needs to hear. So if you have listened to some of my other episodes, I talk about self-soothing a lot. I actually name it as the number one skill set that those of us who resonate with anxious attachment need to cultivate, because what we've been doing for our whole life is looking to other people to soothe us, to make us feel okay, to validate us, to make us feel loved. And this isn't wrong, this isn't bad, but at some point you can probably feel that your self-sourced security, that your self-validation, that your self-love is a little bit lacking, because we've constantly been looking for it from the outside world. And when we do that, we actually have a bit of a subconscious belief that everything's about us. So when they don't text back, or when they respond in a weird way, or when they do a weird thing or whatever we make some story about, it's because we assume it's about us. And what's so ironic about that is that people with anxious attachment tend to be really people-pleasing and quite selfless on the outside, but on some level, we're actually super selfish, because we have this idea that everything is about us when it's not. People have so many other reasons to not text you back or to behave a certain way. And as soon as we make it about us, we are also kind of taking away from them whatever their experience is. Maybe they're going through something really intense, and now we're in this whiny, like, you need to make it better for me. Are we okay? Am I okay? Are you mad at me? It's like, do you see how it's kind of not helpful for anyone, honestly? And it doesn't mean that there's not a time and a place to check in with your partner when you feel like maybe they're really disconnected or really withdrawn, and you feel like you've been giving them space, but now it's been a couple days. Like, of course there's room for communication, but we have to take responsibility for our energy, and especially for our energy when we're dysregulated and when we're triggered. And how can you self-soothe? How can you validate what you've been experiencing so that that edge of intensity is relaxed? Because then you're going to communicate and even just think and operate from a much more grounded place. So I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the word hyper-vigilant, but it is when we, somewhere along the line through our conditioning and our experiences of life, created a skill set and a part of our personality that is super aware of everything that's going on around us. And I always give the example of, maybe you're someone who, you're sitting at a cafe with a friend across from you, but you're kind of tracking everything else. You know that the person beside you just dropped their book, and you can see that the couple over there is having an argument, and you can see that the waitress over there forgot something, and you can notice those two people like smiling and laughing at the counter, and you might be thinking, oh my gosh, are they flirting? Like, you're tracking all of these details. You know where the door is, you know where the bathroom is, da 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 da, and it takes a lot of energy to do that. And when we are hypervigilant, we tend to have gotten that way because there was someone we needed to be really attuned to. So this could be a parent who was volatile, who changed their moods a lot, a parent that suffered, I mean, it doesn't even have to be that they suffered with mental health issues, but just that they were volatile, that you never knew what mood they were in, that you didn't know if they were gonna be happy or be impatient or be upset, or you just notice that the general consensus was that we're all gonna emotionally babysit this adult. And so you learn that as a kid and you develop this hypervigilance. And that is why sometimes these small things from other people can feel really big in the nervous system. So, for example, when I was a teenager and I wanted to just sleep in, but I lived on a farm and there was a lot of work to be done, when my dad would come in the door, there was a little ding on the door, essentially. And so that ding, I knew it was him, and I would jump out of bed and pretend that I had already been awake and was getting ready for the day or whatever, because I thought he was going to get mad at me for sleeping in. And he wouldn't be aggressive, but he would be like, get up, you need to get up. So when I started going back to visit my parents as an adult, I would notice that if I heard the door in the morning, my body would like, oh my gosh, like, am I in trouble, basically? And that is an example of being hypervigilant, and an example of something small where my nervous system had a big reaction, even though my adult self knows I can stay in bed as long as I want. I can do whatever I want. I don't have to appease him. I still could if I wanted to, but I don't have to, right? So that's just an example of my mind knows, but my body's having a different response. And so what I can do in that moment, and what you can do in similar moments, is getting really curious. So we already talked about being gentle. We already talked about validating, and then we want to get curious. Like, what is this part really worried about? Because we're usually worried about something super tender, that he's going to get mad. Well, what does that mean? Well, then he's gonna say something rude. He's gonna call me lazy, or he's going to basically take love away. He's gonna reject me on some level. And when we can see that, and then I can give myself that, I can remind myself, hey, you actually stayed up till 11 last night and you like to get 8 hours of sleep. So it's completely acceptable that you're sleeping till 7 or 8 a.m. That is one of your values. Could be like, oh yeah, that is my value, that is my choice. And of course, this is going to be completely different for you, but that curiosity is really this bridge between a response that's more should or shamey versus a response that's actually healing and helping your nervous system regulate through these triggers. So on August 10th, I'm going really deep on this topic of inner child work and self-soothing in the Becoming Her membership. There's a 7-day free trial, so you can probably just come to the workshop for free and then stay for the rest of the month, or continuous months if you want. I also do Q&A calls in there, and it's a really cute small group of women, and the calls have lots of space, so we get to talk about whatever's coming up for you personally, or you can just come to do live somatic work with me. And if you're listening to this after August 10th, the replay is available in the membership, and it will be available for 6 months. And if you just heard me say somatic practice for the first time and you're not really sure what that is when we work with our nervous system and our body and the sensations of the body to regulate. So it's one thing to talk ourselves out of a trigger or talk ourselves out of a response, and another thing to actually help the body move from the survival response it just went into, whether it's fight or flight or freeze or fawn, back into a regulated state. And it is shown, proven scientifically, that if we are constantly in survival mode, we're not really making the best decisions, because the part of our brain that can make good, conscious, calculated, open decisions is not online, because our body's saying, oh, there's a threat here, I need to just survive, and what do I do to survive? And that's when we sort of start to show up as smaller versions of ourselves or defensive versions of ourselves that we don't want to be. So somatic work helps us retrain the body to spend more time in regulation and actually be able to handle more perceived or real stress without going into a survival response. And sometimes our window of ability to handle real or perceived stress is really small. So we get to expand that window. It's called the window of tolerance. Teach all about it in the Becoming Her community. And to wrap us up, one question I always get about this when I'm talking to people and explaining it is, well, how many times do I have to do this? How many times do I have to do inner child work? It's a little bit emotional. How many times do I have to regulate myself this way? And what I will say is, it's not like you have to find your inner child who is 2 years old and spend 30 more years with her so that she grows up into a 30-year-old with you, or you know what I mean? But we do need to repeat, right? Because if you were actually trying to teach a small child something, you wouldn't just tell them once. You can't just say one time, "You're loved, honey, don't worry." She might feel great about that in that moment, but then life is going to keep lifing and you're going to feel stressed again. You're going to get triggered again. So we have to self-soothe and self-soothe and self-soothe. But what I will say, sometimes we have to do it really repeated a lot in the beginning. Let's say you do an inner child practice from the workshop. It's happening on August 10th. And then for the whole next week, you're going to keep checking in with that part of you. And this does not mean putting a picture of your inner child on your nightstand. That's a sweet practice. It's cute, but it is not necessarily going to integrate on a nervous system level and sort of mature that part of you so that your responses to these triggers aren't so big or aren't so disproportionate. So maybe you work with her every day for a week, and then maybe a few weeks later something happens, you go back to it. Then maybe a month later something happens, you go back to it. So the time, the amount of reps basically thins out. And still, I'm 5 or 6 years into this work. I consider myself basically fully incredibly secure. And still, I need to check in with my inner child once or twice a year when big things happen or when I get really overwhelmed or when I get stressed. So in some ways, it's a lifelong skill that you will use. That would also be super supportive in parenting. If you're a parent, that's even supportive in relationships in general, and how we communicate to each other and how we see each other and what we consider and how the other person is feeling. So inner child work and self-soothing is non-negotiable for the anxious attacher to be able to move towards secure, which is why we're doing a full 90-minute workshop on it on August 10th, like I said. So the link for that is in the description. You can also go to becomingsecurecommunity.com/membership. If you're watching this video, then it's going to be on screen. And yeah, the next episodes are going to be a little bit of wedding stuff, a little bit about what it's like to go from dating anxious avoidant to secure, and eventually that becoming a marriage. Lots of things I learned along the way. So make sure you are subscribed or following this show to be notified for that episode. And in the meantime, hopefully I will meet you inside Becoming Her. Talk to you soon. Mwah.